My Family Thinks I'm Crazy, a podcast where I, your host, try to give you some tips on how you can explain all this weird, wild, crazy conspiracy stuff to the people you love most. Because that's what I've been trying to do for the past 10 years with no success.
I've been telling everybody that our government is shady, but every time I do, my family thinks I'm crazy. The hollow earth, UFOs, aliens invading, fluoride in the water, they spray our skies daily. When I talk about these things, they think I'm crazy. There's no escaping anymore the evil that we're facing. Illuminati mind control, they're sacrificing babies. The end of days, but anyways, my family thinks I'm crazy.
What, they don't want to listen to you?
No, they don't want to listen. They don't want to hear it. They're just like, oh, here we go, Mark. Off again with your...
Mark being Mark again.
Yeah. So, that's the thing about podcasts is when you're on the air, and it's like therapy, If I can't talk to my family about this stuff, I'll talk to you, Matt, and all our listeners.
You'll just tell your whole podcast.
Yeah. So who are we talking about today, Matt?
They think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. My family thinks that I'm crazy.
No matter what part of the world you find yourself in at this moment, take notice. There is a path, trail, or sidewalk that will lead you to your next journey. Whether by foot, car, bus, train, plane, or bicycle, the road is calling. And I promise, wherever you end up, the journey will be the most memorable. And when you do, keep your eyes peeled and your psychic senses tuned in, because the world's a strange place when you get out and see it. And doing just that is returning guest Chris Matthews, who's setting out this summer on an epic adventure around the country with the help of you amazing podcast listeners. I'm Mystic Mark, and thank you for tuning in to this episode of the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast.
Said that. Check this out. Check out this. All right, you said goo. All right, so I'm in the shower. Everything's Dungeness. The water's like dingy on me. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I can't snap out of this. Like usually it's like a loop. It'll go away. These visions come and go when you're on these psychedelic experiences. But I was trapped in it. Like I was deep. I was deep in this loop that I was a reptilian slave in this kind of mind prison. And I'm like, what is going on? Am I ever going to get out of here? Did I die and slip into hell? Is this real? And I didn't quite understand what was happening at the time. Then all of a sudden, I get hit with this loud, commanding voice in my head that says, no, you're being deceived. And as I hear this and feel this vibration and rumbling, the lights, boom, shine onto my bathroom, the brightest light I've ever seen. All the mold and stuff falls away. Black goo, black goo, black goo, black goo, down the drain of the shower. It was the nastiest looking stuff I've ever seen in my life. And the lights were pulsing bright white, and I felt the presence of my spirit guides. I felt the presence of angelics.
Thanks again for joining me, Chris. We are recording here on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. And as I was just letting you know, I'm very, very excited to have you here to talk about this podcast nationwide tour that you're going to be doing. I keep saying world tour. Hey, if you go to Canada or Mexico, it's kind of a multinational tour, but here we are on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, and you've been here before. I've been on your awesome show, so maybe if there's any newcomers, can you tell us about yourself real quick and then lead into this tour that you're planning on doing?
For sure. Well, Mark, man, thank you so much for having me on again. Always a blast. Always fun talking with you. I've been looking forward to this. And people can find me on all podcast platforms. Our website is forbiddenknowledge.news. We're available here on Rockfin and let's see, Odyssey and Rumble. There's a couple more. We're limited on YouTube. But yeah, that's where you can find us. And what I'm doing here with the what you called podcast nationwide tour, that's pretty cool. It's going to be a lot more than that. It's going to be kind of a culmination of my life's work, which has not been that many years. It's only started in like 2016. I started doing this stuff, but it's going to be that, and combined with all the wonderful people I've met along the way that I'm hoping to get involved with this, and the audience and other podcasters like yourself. And it's going to be huge, man. What I'm really want to do is, starting this summer, start traveling across the United States. First, we're going to head to the Southwest. That's where we're closest here, over to California, up to the Northwest, and then over to the Northeast, down through Florida, back around to the South, and shoot up through the center of the United States. And along that trip, I want to stop and do interviews, live interviews. I want to get footage of sacred sites, of places of high strangeness, paranormal hotspots, places we talk about on our podcast. And I want to interview people that know about these places. But not only that, I want to kind of showcase my experience along the way. I want to integrate old interviews that I've done, as well as plenty of new ones with new faces. I have some amazing people that have already jumped on to work with me on this. People like Mathieu LaCroix, Billy Carson, hopefully Randall Carlson. I mean, it's going to be banging. And hopefully we'll be able to sit down with a lot of these people and do, interview style. But this is not going to be like a regular document. It's going to be a docuseries, because we're going to have so much that goes into this. It's probably going to start out with 8 or more episodes of us, traveling the country and doing this. Go ahead.
Let me say, because I gotta say, I heard this secondhand and I was so excited. I didn't even think to do any research. So I'm learning all this for the first time. When I heard this secondhand, I had envisioned you'd stack up a couple live events at cities and make your way there, kind of like Sam does with comedy. This is really awesome compared to the idea I had in my head. So you're going to be, you name some heavyweights for sure. LaCroix is, I know, up in my neck of the woods. So I'm excited at the chance that maybe we'll be at some sort of tour that he might give us or something. Like, what do you let's get into the details here. And I don't want you to give away too much if you
because I'm gonna be surprised myself, I'm sure, by the time we start filming and everything rolls out. But basically, I think the whole vision of everything is going to come together after we start filming and after we start doing interviews. But along our trip, we're going to have certain hotspots, paranormal hotspots, certain places of history, of interest, conspiracy history. We're going to stop by Dealey Plaza in Dallas. Just all the topics that I'd cover over the years are going to be broken down into little sections of this docuseries. Like, we'll start out with UFOs or something. Then we'll move to consciousness, and we'll move to spirituality. Then we'll move to more historical conspiracies or cryptids. And each of those little kind of topics is going to be broken down by either episode or, a couple of topics per episode. And as we travel to these certain places that are connected to paranormal activity or ufology or whatever topic that I'm talking about, we'll have interviews lined up coinciding with that. We'll talk with people who are around the area, witnesses, locals, people who have history with it, with whatever, whatever topics we're covering. And also we'll be interviewing some heavy hitters and fellow podcasters like you. I'd love for you to be a part of it. We're going to be traveling all over the United States. I'm sure that we'd find a way to make as many of you as possible a part of it. Man,
that is so cool. Thank you. Yes, I would love to be a part of it. So I'm almost certain I'll still be living here. And so long as I am, if you want a tour of New Haven, Skull and Bones, all that stuff.
Oh, for sure.
I'm your guy. We got to do that. I know Chris Milligan's the expert, but he's all the way on your side.
An ongoing thing for I don't know how long, because there's so many topics. There's so many great people to include in it. There's so many places to visit. Like you said, it may even extend out to Canada or Mexico or different countries one day. I don't know what it's going to do, but hopefully that, the sky's the limit with this thing, and we're going to just keep it going as long as we can with it, as long as we can afford gas and travel and everything like that,
Yeah. And like I was saying to you before we got going here, I really think this is the next phase for podcasters, because the conference scene has existed for a while. People have been getting together, getting in their car and driving far to go talk about these sorts of things with other folks of like mind. And I think it's about time that podcasters start doing this sort of thing. I think we're in the perfect position, and yeah, if you plan it correctly, I mean, yeah, the thing pays for itself, right? Obviously, people are going to, want to donate to this because of the content you're going to be generating. I think that's genius. I hope you have some kind of Scooby-Doo mystery van all rigged up with GoPros, because right on. All right, so
yeah, we're gonna have a pop-up trailer, man. We've got all our lighting, cameras, as much as we can afford, all the professional stuff, clip mics, and we're gonna hit the road and on a wing and a prayer, and hopefully some more donations will come in along the way, and we can afford to make it everywhere we want to go.
Now we know the main ones, right? And I can imagine, based on your, oh goodness, it's a busy night on my street, so I'll do my best to edit that out, folks. But Chris, you might hear a lot of that, so be mindful. So there are some sort of obvious hot spots that I would suggest. I'm sure you've already thought of: Skinwalker Ranch, Georgia Guidestones, that sort of thing, right? But when it comes to you as an individual, you talk to a lot of interesting people. I'm sure you've picked up a few obscure places along your podcasting journey that have been eating away, like, damn, like I gotta get back to there. That one guy mentioned it. I mean, for me, Corey Daniels, he said a lot about a place called the Superstition Mountains. It stuck with me so much that I was at a used bookstore recently, and I found a map of the Superstition Mountains, and I bought it. I don't even live anywhere near Arizona, but I have a map of the Superstition Mountains. So, I mean, that would be on my short list. Are there any that come to mind for you that are maybe a little more obscure?
Yeah, for sure. There's a couple that I can't mention. There's a couple that we're definitely hitting. One I can mention is I can't disclose exactly where it will be. It'll be in Alabama. It's a new place of high strangeness that they're making, documentaries and TV shows about. They have a paranormal investigative team, like, former military, big time legit stuff that they're doing out there that hopefully we can go maybe join them a couple of days and see what they got going on out there. I'm looking forward to that. What I'm really looking forward to is, I can't say too much about it, but we're going to have access to the back of Skinwalker Ranch, basically. So that's going to be fun. And we have a lot of people who are associated with, working the ranch and surrounding areas that we'll be talking to as well to get their insights. And I know that there is a couple places in the Northeast that I want to hit for cryptids. There's one in Kentucky, near the mountains of Kentucky. Lots of lore there, goblins, fairies, all kinds of crazy stuff. Of course, we're going to be hitting Roswell and your common UFO places. We're going to hit Shasta, some places in California, and man, I'd like to hit the one that you just mentioned, the Superstition Mountains too. Then now that you said that, I hadn't even thought about that. I know we're gonna hit Chaco Canyon as well, and there's a few others that I can't really mention. They're like surprises for us, but yeah, we got some good ones.
Yeah, please do not feel pressured to disclose those, because I feel like people are going to be suggesting when they hear this. They're going to be reaching out, they're suggesting, and they might hit on some of those secret places. They might just unknowingly suggest some of those secret places. So if I do that, please let me know. Right. Well, you don't have to reveal your places, but I want to maybe throw some suggestions in the ring. Hart Plaza.
Sure, man. We are down for it. Where's that?
Hart Plaza in Detroit. Have you ever learned about this place?
No, I don't think so. What's down with Hart Plaza?
So it was designed by a very interesting gentleman from Japan who also designed the Japanese garden at the UNESCO Center in France. He designed a significant portion of Yale University here in Connecticut, and a couple other pretty well-connected type of locations, you know, big, important types of businesses and so on. But this guy who I'm going to have on my show in the next week or so, Chad Stemke, he's up there in Detroit, and he's found a lot of really strange stuff in Hart Plaza that seems to mirror Egyptian symbolism. So I would definitely recommend, because, you know, sometimes you might run into some states where you're like, yeah, let's just skip Michigan. We got to go all the way north into it. Like, don't skip Detroit, though. You might actually find some interest. Be careful. I've never been to Detroit, so don't ask me what it's like. Right. But I've heard some cool things. Man,
if it's interesting enough, we're there. We're going to try and get to, you know, like I said, as many of them as possible.
Well, then, I'll leave this one with my last suggestion. The Susquehanna River, which is huge.
Mike, yeah, I already talked to Mike about this.
Talked to Mike.
He emailed me, yeah. That's on the list for sure.
Right on. I think I might have mentioned this to Mike, so I don't know if he heard it from me or you emailed him first, but yeah, Mike, I can say personally, and maybe we got into this the first time we talked when I was on your, but I've had a very, very visceral experience just from being in touch with the Susquehanna River.
The area it's insane.
It's beautiful.
Like, from what I saw, it's pretty undescribable compared to everywhere else around there.
Yeah, here, I'll show you this. I mean, Mike took us to this place called Baines Bridge, Pennsylvania, and it's on the Susquehanna River. And I found this rock there. It's like this sort of strange, like orange shape. It almost looks like a cow or something, or like, you know, like a rough shape of an animal, but it's this pale blue stone with this like orange sort of stuff on it. And this is one of just many really strange rocks all around this area on the Susquehanna. I think they're called like the pothole rocks or something like that, but they're these perfectly smoothed out circles in these rocks, and there's hundreds of them, and it's right next to 3 Mile Island, which is that nuclear facility that had I think it was in the 80s or the 90s, it had some kind of meltdown, or it was in the news for some reason. So yeah,
I heard of that.
Mike can definitely fill you in on all this significance, you know, the right to the 40th parallel. He's got 4 different significant locations over there. I definitely recommend taking a few days in that neck of the woods. But yeah, man, that's
on the list.
This is really cool. I think there's a lot of people out there who are going to want to be a part of this. There's a lot of people who are going to hear this. They're going to say, Chris, come to my town. Chris, come check out this weird thing. So is there a certain, I mean, it sounds like you sort of are focused on high strangeness, paranormal, extraterrestrial. You also have a sort of element of history going on. Are there any like subjects that maybe people wouldn't expect you guys are also going to include into this?
I mean, we're big time into spirituality. I'd like to integrate psychedelics, consciousness, PSI phenomenon, you know, consciousness ability, psychic abilities. Everything that I even want to get cryptocurrencies in there, because I think that is a big, you know, controversial topic when we enter these new ages of these technological ages that we're being put into. So that transhumanism, just things, you know, that are on people's minds, especially in this community these days. Anything and everything that could possibly pop up there, man, we're gonna cover it.
Right on. Well, I'm excited about that, man. I definitely want to tune in. I want to see what happens, and I hope I'm a part of it.
For sure, man.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everything going as planned if you do make it up, because New England's kind of an isolated area. I mean, there are some strange things, but you got to cross the Hudson River. It can be a pain in the ass. So if you don't end up making it up here, we understand. But,
no, man, but that's on the list for sure.
Yeah.
And something else I wanted to mention, where we all are going to focus on a lot of Native American history and lore, because, you know, it's associated with everything in this country. So that's going to be a big part of it as well. Got some natives and indigenous peoples lined up for interviews, and that's going to be one of my favorite topics to cover there.
So you mentioned you'll be leaving from the Rocky Mountains, the high mountains going down in the Southwest. I was just listening to an episode of Coast to Coast recently with a man who has passed away now, and so has Art Bell, but Robert Ghost Wolf. And you mentioned the Native Americans. He's got a pretty famous book called The Last Cry. It's like a compilation of different prophecies and whatnot. And it does feel like, 20, 30 years ago, these guys that are kind of like the OGs of what we're doing now, Coast to Coast, some of those names have made their way into the podcasting world. I'm sure you've interviewed plenty of people who have been interviewed by Art Bell, but it seems like there is really what they were sort of aiming for then. It seems to be happening now, this sort of convergence, harmonic convergence. We talk about like 2012 kind of being off by 8 years and happening in 2020. Seemingly, the powers that be have desperately tried to shut everything down since that year, and seems like we're kind of, that's waning. This is like such an inspiring thing to hear, going back to what you're doing, because last summer that wouldn't have been possible. The summer before that wouldn't have been possible. You've been working on this since 2016. I mean, do you think that this is a part of this mass awakening? You mentioned having some meditation experiences recently, some psychedelic experiences recently. Are you feeling a higher calling for this journey, Chris?
I always am, man. Ever since I had my first experience and I got connected with what I consider to be my guides and the path that I chose to be on at this point, everything has been surreal. As far as the podcast revolution that you're talking about, everything that's happening right now, it is so amazing, man. I can go on Rockfin, or I can go on Spotify, and there are like literally probably over 100 podcasts that I really enjoy listening to that didn't exist a couple of years ago, that weren't there, that just popped up after this, this revolution that you're speaking of. And I love it, man. I love all the thirsting for knowledge, and not only that, people not afraid to get out there and put it out there. So that's one thing that I'm really encouraged about. We didn't have this kind of, I guess, choice of, topics and people that are out there covering this as we do now. And that makes me happy. I think that is a sign of the revolution that we're in. And as far as me personally, man, I just follow synchronicities. I follow what my gut and my guides have told me to do. One of those things was to figure out past traumas and heal through the use of psychedelics. And I did, and that was one of the best decisions I ever made. I still occasionally do have vision quests with psilocybin mushrooms, and every experience I've learned something very profound about myself. But it did all start with just meditation. I started out, it was just a couple of years ago with meditation. I told you about my contact experience last time I was on your show, and which that contact led to communication with what I've come to understand as my spirit guides. And these guys instructed me that if I would like to fast track my healing from childhood traumas and get past some of my blockages that were keeping me from achieving what I wanted in my life, a good way to do that is through psilocybin or psychedelics or whatever your psychedelic of choice was. And mine was psilocybin. So I started growing my own mushrooms, and I had some profound experiences and got in touch with not only my spirit guides, but different types of what I consider entities that exist just maybe beyond the spectrum of our reality. Some that I consider angelic, some that I consider maybe interdimensional, if you want to call them extraterrestrial. All these beings seem to have a connection to different parts of my consciousness, though. It was very personal, the interactions that I had with these beings. Some of them were prophetic. Some of the interactions, things that may happen and did happen in the future. And that was another profound aspect of it. But my experiences kind of came to an ultimate head with, as far as psychedelics go, recently when I had one of my last mushroom experiences. It was actually about a month ago. And it was very profound. I was in the process of, I had just moved to this new place here in Colorado. And for a while I was growing mushrooms. I don't anymore, but I had acquired some from a friend. And I decided that I wanted to go on a few more vision quests to kind of see if there was anything else I needed to take care of within my consciousness, childhood traumas, anything that would pop up, because, you know, I'm sure there's always something. As far as I know, every time I've gone back, I learned something new about myself, about my past, or something that I needed to do in the future, or just take care of anything that was kind of hidden in my subconscious. So this experience was no different, but I was with my new girlfriend at the time, October, and she had never, ever, ever done mushrooms before. And she is a very gifted medium, intuitive. She does cleansing. She's done channelings before. She's very gifted. And, you know, for me, I've talked to hundreds of psychics and people who claim to have these gifts. And, you know, I have a pretty good intuition about who's legit and who's not. And she has shown herself to be very proficient with her gifts. And she wanted to try mushrooms. And I was like, all right, sure. I've done them before. I'll guide you through this experience. Well, I thought that's the way it would go, but no. We started her out with a very small dose, probably a little over a gram. I mean, not that small, but enough for her to feel something, a little over a gram. And, you know, I took my usual dose, and within an hour or so, I'm in the spirit realm. I'm feeling the effects. She is not. She says she feels a little sleepy. She doesn't feel anything. So wait a little while longer. I don't want to give her too much because, you know, sometimes these things can creep up on you. You don't want to make that mistake. So wait, you know, at least a couple of hours. I give her some more, and another hour or two goes by. Nothing. She's like, I just feel sleepy. I don't feel anything. You know, I feel maybe a little bit more alert or in tune. I have a great connection with my spirit guides right now. I can tell you that. And she's like, you know, I was like, well, here, you want to take the last we have? This would be a heroic dose. I gave her like over 5 grams, which was a lot, especially for someone who has never experienced this before. And these were good. These are pretty damn potent. You know, I've experienced it a lot, and for me, these were pretty good. So she's taken 5 grams, nothing. And I'm just like, wow, this is crazy, you know. But I did notice that she had this connection to like electronics and the lights and our radio. And if she would feel a certain emotion, a certain song would increase or decrease in volume. She was listening to classical music. It switched to pop music. She's like, I didn't switch it to pop music. I want classical. And as soon as she said that, it's boom, switched back. And this is through Bluetooth speaker through our phone. You know, she's not switching from classical to pop
She's not
music,
like connected to a CAT scan device, like with nodes on her head to your phone.
But not only that, during different conversations and portions of conversations, depending on what we were talking about, the lights would dim and go lighter if we would become emotional or sad. The music would also correspond. And I thought I was experiencing this because I was on mushrooms. I'm like, this always happens, you know? But she was noticing it too. She wasn't feeling the effects. I was like, are you noticing all this? She's like, yeah. I said, it's pretty weird. It's like, all right. So we continue. The night goes on, and I decide. She's like, well, do you have anything you need to take care of with any traumas or anything? And we end up exploring through that, and she finds an actual childhood trauma and spiritual attachment that was attached to the trauma that she was able to get rid of during this experience. That was pretty profound. Again, the music would change as she was guiding me through the release of this entity, this attachment. Did I say spirit guide? This spirit attachment. It was not a good thing. She was guiding me through the release of this. Eventually it was released. And again, when this entity was released, the lights became brighter and the music changed to something triumphant. And it was really a profound experience. And I felt amazing. Well, I found out later, apparently there was another attachment that you could say, spiritual attachment that was attached to me for a very long time. And it was very nasty in nature, and it kind of revealed itself. It manifested itself to me. And I know it was, people say during these psychedelic experiences, you're going to have hallucinations, right? You're going to see things that aren't there. I think that's true to a certain extent. I think that you also gain access to things that most people can't see that exist on a different spectrum, that could exist on a different frequency. But then again, I'm not saying for sure what I saw was in real or any way, but it was definitely attached to my consciousness, and it was very real for the time I was experiencing it. Well, after this first spiritual kind of attachment was expelled and she got rid of it for me, she was talking and she was trying to tell me something about her daughter or something. It was a normal conversation, and all of a sudden, whatever she's saying becomes darker and more intense and just like kind of disturbing and evil. And then she says, I crash landed on this planet thousands of years ago, and I was looking for the right human to attach to. And one day you came along and I attached myself to you, and I helped you grow. I helped you get to where you are. And look at you now. And as she said that, she shapeshifted. Like, she changed into the most terrifying, disgusting looking, what I can describe as reptilian entity I've ever seen, as she's talking to me and telling me these things. And she's like, aren't you going to stay with me? Aren't you going to keep me? And as she's saying this, I take off out the room. I just seen my girlfriend shapeshift into a reptilian. But not only that, my whole house is changing. I look outside and the sky is blood red. The walls are like filled with mold, and the windows look like they have bars on them now. And I realize I'm in this complete mental loop where I'm stuck as a reptilian's basically mind prisoner. Everywhere I went, I was stuck in this kind of dungeon looking place. Everywhere I would go in my house, everything was different. And when in reality, my girlfriend's chasing me around going, "What's going on? Are you okay?" I'm seeing this reptilian entity going, "Don't you love me? Don't you want to be with me anymore? I've gotten you this far." And I don't know what to do. So I go upstairs and I just jump in the shower for some reason. Something told me to, go to the shower. I'm letting water run over me.
I'd do the same thing.
Yeah, dude.
Lizards probably dirty. Turn into a puddle of witch goo when they get hit with water anyways.
I can't believe you just said that. Check this out. Check out this. All right. You said goo. All right. So I'm in the shower. Everything's Dungeness. The water's dingy on me. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? I can't snap out of this. Usually it's like a loop. It'll go away. These visions come and go when you're on these psychedelic experiences. But I was trapped in it. I was deep. I was deep in this loop that I was a reptilian slave in this kind of mind prison. And I'm like, what is going on? Am I ever going to get out of here? Did I die and slip into hell? Is this real? And I didn't quite understand what was happening at the time. Then all of a sudden, I get hit with this loud, commanding voice in my head that says, "No, you're being deceived." And as I hear this and feel this vibration and rumbling, the lights, boom, shine onto my bathroom, the brightest light I've ever seen. All the mold and stuff falls away, and I puke up black goo down the drain of the shower. And I'm sitting there puking up this black stuff. I see it. I wish I could have kept it to show people after. It was the nastiest looking stuff I've ever seen in my life. And the lights were pulsing bright white. And I just felt the presence of my spirit guides. I felt the presence of angelics. And I know what these presences feel like through meditation and the other contact experiences I've had through psychedelics. At the same time I had jumped in the shower, my girlfriend was doing a meditation ritual to get rid of this other attachment. She had seen it with her mind's eye. She knew it was here. She knew what was going on. As I was puking, before that, she had grabbed this entity etherically and threw it through a portal. I don't know how she does this stuff, but she was able to kind of find it etherically and expel it with the help of Archangel Michael and Gabriel and other angelic beings or whatever she called upon to help her do this, however she does it. And the same time she was doing that, that's when I puked up all this black stuff, and the light was shining bright. The music was playing this like triumphant classical music. It got really loud. It was insane. I had never experienced anything like that, whether I was sober or on psychedelics or anything. It was the most profound experience I've ever had. And, you know, when I got out, I told her, she's like, yeah, I know. I was there with you. After you started running around the house, I just kind of stopped. I was like, all right, I got to figure out what's going on. And she saw this entity in her mind's eye and was able to kind of trap it and guide it through a portal. And I felt amazing. Like that whole rest of the night, the whole week, next week, I still feel like a weight has been lifted that I was living with for years and years and just dragging me down and kind of giving me doubts throughout the years and making me feel a little sluggish here and there. And that's what it was. It was actually a spiritual type of attachment that manifested itself to me during a psychedelic experience as a reptilian. And that's what I've come to understand that. And that was a crazy experience.
That's incredible. Yeah. Wow. I have, a bunch of questions. I have no doubts about it at all. I mean, had nothing similar, but I've had equally strange, we'll say, psychedelic, particularly mushroom experiences. But it makes you wonder, like, the contrast between the two of you's experience, your significant other and yourself. It's like she has like a different organ or something, not that there's like an extra organ, but like the mushrooms are affecting maybe like your parietal gland, just an example, and her pineal gland, right? Or for whatever reason, it's almost like, and I think I'm kind of included in this because I'm not psychic by any means, and I've never been a medium, but I've had mushroom experiences where I was disappointed like that. Never quite broke through to this realm. So I wonder what that is in certain people. I always chalked it up to I have a very high metabolism, and I thought like, oh, well, maybe I'm just like burning through these shrooms really fast or something, you know? But I think there is a certain quality to that, because sometimes, especially when I was initially getting into mushrooms, I would have these sort of like what felt like downloads. I didn't have that word to describe that feeling at that point in my life, but it did sort of feel like a download. But yeah, I wonder what that is about certain people where, you know, maybe it's the point you are in your life. Like, have you had mushroom experiences yourself that reminded you of how she was in that moment, or have they always been that?
Every psychedelic experience I've had, as long as it was legit stuff, has been good. I've done everything.
Well, I mean, like immersive, because that sounds like a very immersive hallucination.
No, this was different. I mean, I've never been, like I said before, I've had, what some may consider hallucination. This was the most immersive type of situation I've ever been in. And from what I understand, you'd have to do something like ayahuasca to experience maybe similar things. This, like, I literally thought that, I knew I had taken the mushrooms. Hallucinating is a possibility, but this was something completely different that I've been used to. I have tripped hundreds, if not, I don't know, I don't want to say the true amount of time, lots of times on mushrooms, and this never happened like this. And I have to believe that there was much more to this experience than just me having a psychedelic hallucination.
I just had
it was just felt so immersive,
I just had a really interesting thought. This is speculation, but what if, since she is so used to connecting with others in this position as a medium, what if somehow she channeled the psilocybin from her to you to sort of power up this experience that only she could be there to mediate? Like, because if you took that much on your own, I mean, who knows, you would have went down a roller coaster ride that ended in a pile of black goo, possibly. Here she is kind of helping you through this, taking the form of your, kind of reminds me of the rite of passage in tribal situations where your elders are like dressing up in masks and scaring the piss out of you, and then they take the mask off and they're like, dude, it's your pop, it's your grandpa, like, we're here, you're a warrior now, it sort of has that sort of tinge to it too. But I wonder if that's like due to her mediumship, that like she didn't experience much, but you got like almost like a double
That's
dose.
An interesting thought, man.
Yeah,
I think that's possible. I think it's highly possible. Just the aspects of the electromagnetic aspects of this were profound, because I thought at first it was just part of, again, me hallucinating. Maybe I took more than I thought and some weird things were just being perceived differently. But no, she, even after we sat down and talked the next day about everything, and she was like, yeah, that was very strange. I've never done anything like that before. I've never been able to control the radio. And I saw it myself. I was doing it. I was changing stations. The lights were responding to our emotions, not only mine to yours too. And it was, you know, it was like, wow, that's something different, you know?
It certainly speaks to the, you know, consciousness being first and being everywhere and not being limited to our, you know, brain space. So yeah, wow. I mean, that's definitely interesting. And to the point about, you know, comparing that to ayahuasca, we do often hear about these like really psychedelic black substances from people who take ayahuasca and maybe even, you know, these deep mushroom trips. But have you, I'm sure you've interviewed someone about black goo, and like, because it kind of fits into two genres, right? You hear some ufologists talk about this miraculous unknown substance called black goo, and then we hear about this in psychedelic experiences. The two might not totally fit together, but do you think there is anything to this black goo and, you know, that's otherworldly but also connected to psychedelics?
Man, it could be. You know, I don't know if it would be directly connected to psychedelics, but maybe the whatever frequencies we tune into whenever we're under the effects of psychedelics may expel or get rid of some of this stuff or have an effect on it. I think that there's definitely something to the black goo aspect, and connected to whether it's when you call extraterrestrials or something more spiritual, because I've also talk to people who've had paranormal or haunting experiences where they've been what perceived to be possessed by an entity or attachment, a demon, and they, when they expel the demon or get rid of it, they puke up black stuff. And I've talked to a few people that have had that experience as well. So that also brings me back to this, you know, spiritual aspects of it. Is this black stuff some kind of like ectoplasm or you know, spiritual kind of sickness that's in us whenever we have these attachments? Or is it something manufactured, like you said, maybe an extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial manufactured type of substance that can, you know, have reptilians attached to it? I don't know. It's interesting.
Well, and it almost, I mean, it feels like more appropriately to the first portion of what you said, like a byproduct of us being in whatever this dense third, you know, dimensional world. And reptilians, at least from a recent conversation I had, to my understanding, they're like stuck in this third dimension to some degree, and maybe even like on their way to the second because of their naughty behavior. So maybe that's why they're, you know, linked. And gray aliens don't have the best reputation either, and you sometimes hear them involved with the black goo stuff. I'm doing a lot of like big wide brush strokes, but I mean, there are positive, you know, grays. I couldn't
even say for sure that it's a reptilian. Maybe that's just what it manifested itself as from my consciousness. You know, I'm pretty sure that it was a spiritual attachment of some sort that did not have my best interest in mind. And even after that, I had a session done where I had another attachment removed, and the person removing this attachment said that this was a very lighthearted attachment, that thought it was doing me well because it would kept me comfortable and it kept me from doing things that were too dangerous. So I believe that there are attachments that do believe they're doing good for us, but are not ultimately have our best interest in mind if we look at it the way to where they're holding us back or something like that. And from what I understand about spiritual attachments and entities is a lot of people have them, man. It's very common, and they may not cause problems in people's lives, and they may cause a lot of problems in people's lives. It just depends on the severity and your personality and your attachment to the attachment itself and things of that nature, which I find very interesting. And it would explain, I think that would explain a lot of the mental illness aspects that we don't really understand, and that we misdiagnose and we just throw people on pharmaceuticals and drugs and all these things, when it's really probably something that could be explained by metaphysics and an attachment of spiritual nature.
Absolutely. And, you know, this topic hits a little close to home for me too. I had someone who I consider, by all extensive purposes, a trustworthy psychic on my show, Amy Belair. She's very compelling, talks about a lot of interesting things, but she diagnosed me. She asked me first if it was okay to talk about this on the air. I'm like, yeah, sure, go for it. She said I had a thought bot. I don't know what a thought bot is particularly, as opposed to like another type of entity that might be, you know, attaching itself to you. But if it's bothering me, I wonder, like, you know, to your point about having maybe a pre-diagnosis, we can call it, where someone said, oh yeah, this attachment seems like it's helping you somehow. Like, wonder how deceptive these things can be, you know, because they're sort of interacting in that realm. So they come across a psychic who maybe is a little new or something, and you're trusting them because shit, like, you're not as psychic as they are, and then they get fooled. Now you're more fooled. So it's definitely a tricky road. And I mean, drugs, you add that into the picture, I've heard it only increases the potential, so especially with the more, you know, harmful, ugly drugs, you know, like we're talking about some pretty clean, natural stuff here. Mushrooms, me particularly, I like cannabis, getting dirtier and dirtier as it gets more and more legal. But for now, I feel like there's some good energy I'm getting from it. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if I had an entity attachment. You know, my life's certainly not perfect. I mean, look at the title of my show. But, you know, it's like, if it's helping me, did I ask it to be here? Because I can remember in my younger years when I was way more naive than I am now, doing, you know, little like rituals that I would read in some of these books, Hermetic this, you know, Theosophical this, and just trying things out for the sense of like, you know, unwitting experimentation. And yeah, what if I like called some entity in that I thought was going to be like Thoth? You know, I'm like, hey, Thoth, come teach me everything. And this, you know, cousin Randy, who died like 10 years ago, is like hanging around my neighborhood and is like, yeah, I'll be Thoth, you know, is help him relive his, you know, glory years before he died. But it's just, that's like, in real weird speculation, that's possible. I mean, within these realms. What do you think, Chris?
It reminds me. I had Dr. Gregory Little on a couple of weeks ago. He was telling this awesome story about he was interviewing a elderly Native American man who was very in tune with the spirit realm, and he said he used to be visited and terrorized by these little blue entities all the time. He'd go into like this state where he'd get kind of paralyzed, and these little blue entities would come out of everywhere and like try and tickle him and do, you know, the little tricksters. They were trying to trick him and giving him false information about stuff. And eventually he got past the fear aspect and he started embracing these little blue guys. And they started giving him profound cosmic knowledge, like things that were, you know, spiritual knowledge of the universe, the stars, and himself and everything. And it makes me think, what if all these entities are like one thing, all part of this grand kind of consciousness that's split off into the millions of pieces, but it acts as a trickster to get us to learn things, to get us to accept and learn and grow our consciousness. And then at some point, when it feels we're ready, it reveals the true nature of itself and gives us real knowledge and the truth. And I think a lot that speaks for the UFO community, a lot of people that are peddling BS. It speaks for a lot of people who are coming out right now and trying to tell us, you know, a lot of the narratives about the UFOs and 5D and ascension and all this other crazy woo-woo stuff, they might be being tricked by these little blue guys or whatever their little blue guy is that's coming to them. And they haven't gotten past the part to where you have to understand that first you have to get past the trickery and figure out what's really going on for yourself. And maybe then you might be worthy of some knowledge. What do you think about that?
I love that idea. And I think that makes a lot more sense, considering when we have this intuitive feeling, especially in a position where we are as hosts and we're speaking to people who have maybe an agenda, they have something they want to promote. If they're coming from a place of fear, and they're projecting that fear onto you in a way like you should be afraid of this too, I'm always put off by that. I'm always like, okay, now I'm kind of more suspicious about why you want me to be afraid of this. There are exceptions to that, things that maybe are just obviously scary. But for the most part, I think, yeah, when there's a message of love or a message of hope, it tends to ring truer than those who are like beating the drum of, panic, the end is near. And that's not to say that there isn't value in everyone's research, but yeah, I mean, how many of those people are being, sort of carroted on a stick along, given the little nibbles of some truth, but because they're not like taking it to that next level and enlightening themselves on that maybe non-intuitive side, because they're going for just the pure logical side of it. They want to know the facts. They're worried about getting to the case because they want to be a hero and save people, when really you got to realize on that spiritual note, you can only save yourself, right? And I think when you do that, you start to really garner those insights that maybe this gentleman you mentioned, Gregory Little, relaying the story, maybe that's why the trickster transformed for him,
Yeah, man. I think that all the paranormal and what's considered UFO phenomenon, it's such a personal thing. And if you understand it correctly, you come out of it having spiritual growth. You come out of it a better person. You come out of it seeking better for yourself. At least for me, that was my experience, and many others that I've talked to that have had profound, life-changing spiritual experiences, that they've always, come out of it seeking better for themselves. And that was actually how I kind of knew that the entities that I was in contact with had my best interest in mind. One of the first discussions you could say that we've had, it is like, they came out and said, you got to take care of some childhood trauma. We got to show you some stuff, but you're going to take it from there and you got to figure it out. And there's a lot to figure out before you can grow to a point that you need to, but you got to get on that. And I think if they were being deceptive or wanting to probe my butt or trying to get my DNA or find out or something, that wouldn't be first on their agenda for talking to me. So things like that, I think I was actually kind of lucky in that experience that I wasn't approached by deceptive entities, trying to get me to go a certain direction. But unfortunately, I think a lot of people who have positions in this community where they're put out there in front of everybody, they're making a lot of money, they're going to conferences, they're giving presentations, they got a lot of subscribers, and people are listening to them because they had, this initial experience that they didn't understand correctly, and whatever kind of entity is trying to push them in this direction, because it was such a profound experience and people are believing in them, they take off with that. But what happens to the next step? Do they even get to the next step of their evolution if they're taking off and going that direction to deceive people? I don't think so. I don't think that I think once you choose the deceptive route, that those guys are out and you're probably dealing with something completely different for the rest of that interaction.
Yeah, man. And it's a journey, especially with those cases. It tends to be people are leading you down a dead end that they themselves are stuck at, right? And sometimes people become really good at pretending like they're, they become mirage makers where they're like, no, we're not in a dead end. See, the dead end you see does not exist, that sort of thing. And yeah, it is ultimately, and I think that's where we in this position as hosts really have the upper hand, where it's up to our listeners to decide, and we don't go and put our assumptions. Yeah, we don't put our assumptions in front of them and say, hey, only folks who agree with us listen to this. No, people who disagree listen to my show all the time. They're usually the first to comment, but that's here nor there. But before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to share your show again, tell everybody who isn't already listening where they can find you. And then I want to end question for those listening, because you mentioned something, you distinguished between, what I would consider something really important, and maybe most people don't really understand the gravity to what you just said earlier, which was you're going on a vision quest with these mushrooms. You're not just taking mushrooms, right? Because I think a lot of people they expect the mushrooms to do the work for them, right? So after you share your plugs, please, could you help maybe listeners understand, like, how could they go on a vision quest themselves? What distinguishes a vision quest?
Yeah, right on. Well, first, thanks again for having me on. This was great. I had an awesome time.
Likewise.
Love to do it again in the future. You can find me on forbiddenknowledge.news. That's our website. We're on all podcast platforms. We're on Rockfin. We're on Odyssey. We're on Rumble. And we're limited on YouTube. So go check that out. And as far as the vision quest aspect, I call it Vision Quest because it's just that. When I first started psychedelics when I was a teenager, it was a party quest. You know, I was just going out there to have a good time. But then I quit. I hadn't done psychedelics for years, and I'm in my 40s now. And because my spirit guides introduced this to me, I decided I needed to do it because they were right about a lot of things, and they took me very far in the time between that. So for me, a Vision Quest is very intense. It's a lot of work. It's not something that's fun. A lot of times it's terrifying because you go into it and you're not going to have an experience you want. You can't, there's no way that you can steer one of these psychedelic experiences to anything you want. My advice I wouldn't advise anybody to do it, honestly, but if you're going to want to try psychedelics, my advice is go into it with immense respect and honor, and know what you're doing as far as dosage, of course, and don't be stupid. But this is a spiritual tool. And for me personally, every time I have an experience, I face my deepest, darkest self. And I don't come out of that experience until I have slayed that demon. And if I do, that was not a successful experience. If I am still in a panicked and scared and bad state of mind and feel like the trip was horrible, then I didn't get to what I needed to accomplish. By the end of every successful vision quest, I feel in touch with not only my guides, who I then have a conversation about the quest. I feel connected with celestial beings. And I get profound downloads at the end of every psychedelic experience, and I feel like I have a sense of accomplishment, and I discover new things about my past, myself, any traumas I had, and growth, and where I need to go in the next step of my evolution. And if I don't feel like I've accomplished that by the end of my experience, I'll have to do it again, because that's a failed experience because I didn't learn what I needed to learn. And on the other coin of that, when I said you're not going to be able to choose what your experience is like, for me, I never, even if I wanted to work on something, I would go in and it would be about something completely different. You know, I'd want to work on a childhood trauma, and it'd be that I didn't open a door for this old lady earlier. You know, it's amazing how your consciousness will choose what it wants you to work on, when it wants you to work on it during these experiences. At least that's the way it worked for me. And it was always something that was something that I needed to, that maybe was probably more time sensitive than others. Things that I needed to take care of first before I could maybe get to the next stage of what I was working on with trauma or consciousness evolution. So it's work, and it's not just, eating a handful of mushrooms and sitting back and going, woo, I'm on a roller coaster. No, it takes you through a journey of your subconscious and psyche. And it's like having a therapist sitting in your brain with you for, 5 to 8 hours, but a good therapist, like the best therapist ever, that will pull these traumas out and whatever happened to you, and, in your face the whole time until you look at it and deal with it and address it and try and figure it out. And for me, that's what the psychedelics experience was about every time, is getting to the root of what I needed to for my own growth. And it's not a fun ride at times, people, but it can be a beautiful ride if I accomplished what I needed to do. But yeah, man, I think that if you're going to try anything like psychedelics, just know what you're doing when you get into it and do it with respect and honor.
Well said, my friend. Well said. And Chris, this has been the third of 3 really awesome conversations, and I hope to have one in person when you make your way over to this part of the States, and of course many more onward into the future. And tread lightly, folks out there. You might be inspired by Chris's words, but we don't make any recommendations. Don't try this at home, but if you do it wisely. Thank you for listening, and have a great moment wherever you are in the now. There it is, another great conversation with Chris Mathieu coming to you on a Friday. Usually I don't put episodes out on Friday, but June is jam-packed. I'm telling you right now, June is looking good. If you're a fan of the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, I've got some really epic guests, and I can see this month being our biggest yet. We hit 80,000 downloads last month, which is huge. We're almost at 600,000 downloads, and I could not be happier. So everybody listening, I really, really appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. And thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. If you like doing this kind of thing, listening to podcasts, I'm sure you'll love meeting your favorite podcaster in person. And with Chris Matthews touring the country, there's a good opportunity that you can do that. So be sure to stay up to date with Forbidden Knowledge news. I can guarantee that wherever Chris goes, a bunch of interesting people will follow, and maybe one of those interesting people will be you. Maybe one of those interesting people will be myself and my girlfriend Tara. As you may have heard, Chris said he was going to come out our way up here in New England, and if you live in New England, join us on the Telegram. That's the best place to stay in touch, stay up to date on everything going on with the show. And I have done a walking tour meetup in the past, and I think after this conversation, we might consider doing some sort of walking tour in person on a regular basis. Maybe not just of New Haven, but maybe we can organize some special trips to certain interesting places, sacred sites, and so on and so forth. So stay tuned for that. Like I said, Telegram is the best place to do that. And of course, the Patreon is one of the best places you can go to help this show stay on the air, stay up and running. It does not happen for free. It costs me time, effort, hard work, creativity, and of course, green dollars to keep this podcast going. So any support I can get is really appreciated, whether that comes through the Patreon, the Rockfin, or if you can send us a one-time donation. And if you're a crypto person, just hit me up on Telegram. I do accept crypto of any kind. If you have some crypto you can spare, I do take crypto. So yeah, if you'd like to donate to the show that way, if you appreciate what we're doing here, even just a one-time donation will help out immensely, especially if you send me the right crypto, who knows? But yeah, that's always fun. And we've got merch as well. So many new t-shirts in the store. It's crazy. I probably never even wear half of them at this point. There's so many, but I am going to order a few more in the next few weeks and try them out and see how the quality is and all that. And who knows, maybe we'll go with a better merch store sometime in the future, but don't hold out for that. Check out all the great shirts that we have. Not just shirts, there's other things too. Mugs, if you prefer. We do have a mug available, 2 mugs actually, 2 different designs. And we have some other clothing items. We have women's clothing, and we also have sweatshirts. And that probably sounds crazy. Like, how does this guy have like a whole warehouse of clothes? Well, I don't. It's Teespring. It's very easy. If you have a podcast, or really if you have a reason to make merch, or you're just creative and you want to put your art out there, I highly recommend creating a Teespring store. It's really easy. It's free. And all it costs really is half of the price of whatever someone buys. So you get a certain amount of profit, and they get a little bit of profit, and they cover the, whatever cost it takes to create whatever product you design. And it's not just clothes. I got all kinds of stuff. So definitely recommend Teespring for any creative folks out there in the audience. And speaking directly to the creative folks, if there's any musicians, any artists, even somebody, with a talent that maybe I wouldn't even know to list. Who knows? There's so many amazing talents out there. But if there's something that you're talented at doing, please do not hesitate to reach out to collaborate. People reach out often, and I don't have time to get back to every email right away. I promise I will at some point. But yeah, please get in touch with me. I especially love music if it's CC 4.0, public domain. I don't really compromise on that, just to protect the integrity of my podcast. I only use CC 4.0 public domain music. All the music you hear is brought to you by Soundstripe. Shout out to Soundstripe. But anyways, a lot of interesting things happening this month. I've got some really, really great guests coming up. I almost don't want to even mention them, so it'll be a surprise, but I will say, well, I'll say we've got the king of podcast interviews himself, Greg Carlwood, coming on a very special episode of Your Handbook for the Apocalypse. So please do check that out. And then on the Free Thinker Society, if you're tuned into that, you'll see this week, maybe we could call it a sneak preview of the guests that'll be on this coming Monday. So if you want to know who's coming out on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, that sounds weird. If you want to know who's going to be appearing on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast this coming Monday, go and check out the Free Thinker Society podcast right now, because the episode came out yesterday. I won't say who it is, because you got to go subscribe and follow and support us on the Free Thinker Society podcast. If you like listening to me and the guests that I have on the show and the interviews that I do, well, you'll most definitely like Free Thinker Society, because it's me and my friend Mike Romanelli, who is twice my age and has much more wisdom than I in many ways, and maybe has a lot to learn from a guy like me. So it's a fun show. I teach Mike things, he teaches me things, and we bring on really interesting guests to teach us things. We've had KP Burke on the show recently, host of the American Losers podcast. We've had Joe Roop, host of the Lighting the Void podcast. We've had Tino Sanchez, comedian and musician, on the podcast. Dave Zed, so many more. And there's about 50 or 60 episodes prior to when I got on the show. And some of those I was a guest. So if you haven't listened to the Free Thinker Society podcast already, which I'm going to guess that you might not have, because I can see how many downloads we're getting, and it's not anywhere close to what we're getting here on the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast yet. So yeah, please go and get your fill on the Free Thinker Society podcast. I'm there, Mike's there, and it's a fun time. And like I said, the guest that we had on this week will be Monday's guest for this show. So there's your teaser, there's your sneak preview. You got to do a little work to make it happen. And speaking of great shows, like I already mentioned, Your Handbook for the Apocalypse, we have an episode coming out with Greg Carlwood very soon. And of course, we have Illuminati Confirmed, and this June is going to be sweet. The latest episode of Illuminati Confirmed that will be hitting the audio airwaves this week. Is it this week? Let me check right now. Oh yeah, we don't have it scheduled yet. Okay. Well, I'll have to call Juan. Anyways, that's about it. We've got a new episode of Illuminati Confirmed coming out real soon. The UFO Garage podcast will be joining us to have a discussion about aliens, UFOs, and all that good weird stuff. That's all for this episode, folks. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Go support Chris Matthews at Forbidden Knowledge News, and enjoy the moment wherever you are in the now.